Dylan. I was just setting up the meeting minutes because I'll be taking the minutes and doing roll call. So we should be good to start. We have more than enough people. It's 11:37. I'm going to begin with roll call. Why not?
I'm here.
I am here. Lauren. Corolos. Yvette. Mariah. Melanie. Maggie.
Here.
Ricky.
Here. Here.
Ema. Sarah. Carolyn.
Here.
Sabrina. Karima. Manar. Najira. Harrison. Will.
Here.
Terrell. Anna. Abbas.
Here.
Evan. Hamza. Quay. Nanzit. Okay, so I mean, really, if you saw the agenda, there's really not much on it. We just want to go over the scholarship because that's really the only thing that wouldn't be redundant at this point, and really the last priority we need to set up. So in terms of the scholarship, I'm gonna go over like the timeline that we had in mind, and then we can kind of discuss like some of the different things. So we're hoping to send out an email to everyone tomorrow, and then by May 8th, maybe like have the applications due, and then try to give it out by May 13th, because that's when the spring exams should end, like around then. So the people who are interested, we can go over this throughout the week, and then those people interested can be on like the committee to choose the applications when it comes time over that weekend. So we can make like a Google form. Someone can take the lead on that if they want. Basically, I'm just going over like what Sabrina had in mind, like in terms of that timeline. And then we can kind of discuss like how we want to go about and make the requirements. What do we want to set aside for like merit? What do we want to set aside for need-based or financial-based? We're looking at putting around $20,000 just for the scholarship fund, and then we're going to be putting another $20,000 into the emergency fund, just because we've been receiving a lot of emails for that still. And obviously, like, there's not that much funding left for it. Anyone have any thoughts on like what we should put aside for merit and need-based, or like the process?
Dylan, do you know how much is left in the emergency fund right now?
I don't know how much is left. I just know like, because I don't know how much of that 15,000's been given out by the care team yet that we
Okay.
got from the Senate and program board. I don't know. I mean, I assume based on how many people have applied that it would be all used.
Okay. Thank you.
I think Dean Williams just messaged saying that the funds have been depleted.
Okay, yeah, that figures because we have so many people applying.
Wait, so can you like specify like what this timeline's looking like for the scholarship? Because you're mentioning timeline, but like it's what's
Yeah,
like
so I said that we want to send out an email by tomorrow with the full application, make the applications due by May 8th, and then award by May 13th.
wait, so the application has already been made?
No, it has not been made. That's what we're going to discuss. But we want to be able to send it out by tomorrow.
Oh snap! Okay, that's
Yeah.
that's a really crunch time right there.
So Sabrina's drafting the email, and basically we need to make a Google form for an application. Hopefully send it out tomorrow, maybe the next day. Make it due May 8th. I think that's enough time. It's not going to be a very intensive application, but we just need to figure out like what we're going to be looking at.
My only concern, but this also depends on the capability that we're able to. Is there any way we can possibly extend the date for the due date? Only because like it kind of falls under like finals, but like I'm just trying to see like is there any way we could push it back even more, or is it just because like is it like what do you call it? Is it like a set because of like a time barrier that we have, like a time constraint?
Yeah, I don't know. Like Dean Williams, are we allowed to award the funds after May 13th? If so, then we could push it a little bit.
As far as I'm understanding, funds have to roll back. Either you all have to use them, disperse them, or they roll back. So I think that it's definitely a time sensitive issue. I did want to just look, I'm looking at your RadarLink account, and I want to make sure that you all speak with Student Life Accounting just to confirm that the account has been reconciled, because I see that the amount that you all have may not necessarily reflect the transfer of funds.
Yeah, I was gonna bring that up because nothing's left our account. Like not the 50,000 or the extra Senate funds that we gave last week. I think it was.
Right, exactly. And then I know you all got an extra, bonus amount of 20K back in March, but I honestly think the amount that you all are actually working with, once the account is reconciled, will be significantly less. So I'm just trying to understand where the 20K
It's there.
from.
It's included in the amount in that 93.
And what about the other 20K?
We only got one on March 20th. I didn't know there was a second one.
No, I mean, I see the deposit of 20. I thought you all said that you're going to set aside 20K for scholarships and then another 20 for emergency. Isn't that what was just stated?
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I mean,
But we haven't like confirmed a withdrawal from the account, so none of that is like put in as a request yet.
Okay, so I would advise maybe reaching out to Melissa and Tassia first, making sure all of the transfers are actually reconciled, because without the reconciliation of this account, you don't actually know how much you all actually have. So before you can disperse funds, you need to know what the exact number is.
What I have based on like my own, because I kept it in a spreadsheet. We have 53 800, but I'll confirm with Student Life Accounting as well.
Okay.
When do you think we could get an answer by?
I'm gonna email her right now, so hopefully soon.
Cool. So I guess just to clarify, so you're saying that we are in a time constraint, so we have to definitely have it due by May 8th, right?
yeah, I mean, I think that would give enough time to like go over the applications by May 13th, right?
So I don't want you all to underestimate the number of students who are going to apply for this. because the care team has received quite a significant amount of inquiries that are not emergency related. So these are students who are looking to get their summer, classes paid for. So just kind of keeping that in mind, that you probably will have quite an influx of applications. And so it will take a little bit of a heavy lift to review and decide on those applicants. I would definitely advise, in the past, there's been a rubric that was used. So you might want to, I don't know who has that rubric. Who was on the committee last time? Was anyone on the committee from here? From this group?
I thought there wasn't a scholarship.
We didn't go through with it last year. So it might have been 2
Okay,
years
so
ago.
there was a rubric from like 2 years ago then. Let me see if I can pull that up. I think it was when Ali was in the role of the financial secretary. So anyway, I'll try to find that and forward it over to you all. And then my other thought is just to make sure that you all are aware that if a student has a pre-existing balance on their account, any funds that are dispersed will be used to decrease that balance. So again, if I wouldn't necessarily call it a scholarship so much as an award, because it may or may not be able to be used for classes.
That's interesting. So how would they receive the money? How should
So
they?
the funds would get dispersed. So once you all select those recipients, you would forward over their information, so name, RUID, email, and then they would receive the award process through the Office of Financial Aid. But again, because if a student does have an existing balance, any balance that a student has on their account would automatically be applied with those institutional funds before they could receive an award, like a.
Well, that's like a scholarship anyway, right? I mean, if the school gave you a scholarship of that amount anyway, I mean, it would go towards whatever balance you have, right? I mean, I don't see how it's.
But I just don't know
different.
students. I don't know if all students know that, because some students might think, oh, well, I can get this money to pay for summer classes. But the reality is, if you have an outstanding balance, then the money will be going toward paying your balance. So you just might want to make sure that students are
Yeah, we'll have to explain that and say, it's not like a check of money. Here you go. But I think, scholarships, I think usually they go towards those, outstanding balances first, right? I mean, people who get scholarships, doesn't cover everything all the time. So I think we just need to word it and make sure people know like what it is when we send out the email. We'll have to explain that. So in terms of merit-based, right, like Dean Williams is saying, and need-based, what do we want to do? Do we want to do half and half, something else? How do we want to measure it?
To be honest, like, I think given the current circumstances, I feel like it might be prudent to have more of it be need-based. But then, like, given the fact that we've established the emergency fund, like, if we do have an extra 20K, what's the difference between SGA, like, doing all the paperwork and trying to administer that need-based aid, when we could just donate it back to the care team fund that we already established?
My thing with the need-based is, how do we determine that? Like, we can't ask students to tell us their personal information or what's happening, like, what their circumstances are. So how do we even allocate need-based funds to students?
Yeah, that's a pretty good point.
And what might be also kind of difficult is to distinguish between, like what Dean Williams said about people who are looking to get money for their summer classes, and then obviously being unemployed, and then obviously having a pandemic. So it's like three major things that we have to take into consideration.
I mean, I'm just like, because we mentioned before that, like, just talking about the semantics and the phrasing of it, right? Dean Williams suggested that it be called an award, but I don't really feel like need-based award. I feel like need-based award is kind of like an oxymoron, right? And why is there that kind of application process as a barrier? Um, like if we do want to give out like need-based aid, I feel like we should just donate that back to the fund, the emergency fund that we set up, I guess.
This might make more sense, right? I mean, we could, so whatever amount that we decide to put towards need based, this has never happened before where there was a separate need based fund. So, yeah, I think we could take that section of the money we would allocate towards the need based scholarships, just give it to the fund. It's already set up and can measure need based, and then the remainder could be for merit. I don't know, however much left for that based on like merit or extracurricular, like whatever grades. I don't know, but it would be a smaller portion left over.
So just to be clear, those two things aren't mutually exclusive, right? So merit and need can be linked together, right? So I guess one of my questions is, do you all want to award or provide funding for students who have already received some type of emergency aid through SGA, or does that not matter in this case?
Personally, I don't think it matters. Like I know you mentioned that we can link the merit with need-based things, but that just for me that doesn't quite sit right. I think that if we're giving out aid to students and it's for the entire student body population, I don't feel like they should have to fulfill any kind of requirements to receive that. And I just don't feel as though like it makes sense to create this separate like rubric or questionnaire within like the span of a day. When if we are intending to use this for need-based aid, we could just donate it to the emergency fund that we've already set up.
So just to be clear, Harrison, what I think I'm hearing is that you're saying there shouldn't be this extra application or perception around a barrier to access funds if students are in need of the funds for whether or not they have quote the qualifications or credentials or not. Is that what I'm hearing? And to just put all the funds into the emergency aid, or am I hearing something? Am I understanding that differently?
No, that's correct. I mean, that's at least my opinion on the matter, especially given like the pandemic that we're in right now, and given the fact that students would only have a week to apply for this, let alone the time we would need to put into advertising, and like distributing this information to all the students. But I would like to hear like, I mean, if any of the our senators or e-board members has any thoughts on the matter.
I mean, I
So
definitely
I think
agree
it makes
since
sense
we're
to
going to
not
be
do.
doing.
I'm sorry, who was that? You can go first.
Okay. I was gonna say that I definitely agree if we're gonna have more need-based scholarships that we should just forward them to the care team because, like we said, like it's gonna be difficult to ask them for personal information since we're gonna be reviewing the applications. But at the same time, I know that we're gonna be giving out scholarships for undocumented students. How is that gonna work out if we just forward everything to the care team?
Yeah, that's actually glad you brought that up, Carolyn, because I was actually going to say that too. I think that like before we like jump the gun and just decide to give all the remaining funds to the care team, that we get an idea. Like, let's take a look at the rubric that we have existing and see if there's any way we can like make it work, because we do also still have that commitment with the undocumented students to
Right.
give them the scholarships. There isn't a
Yeah.
specified amount in the resolution that we wrote, but it does say that we're supposed to make a commitment to do this. And so, you know, if we don't do it, then the resolution is just just that, a resolution, meaningless unless we do something. Meaningless unless we do actually do something. So
Right.
I think that we're forgetting that point.
Well,
Yeah.
just
Or like, how about?
sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted I forgot what was in the resolution, but for the undocumented students, is it merit based? Like it's specific to undocumented, and then we look at their like criteria for merit scholarships, or was it need based?
I'm double checking right now.
I don't think it's set, honestly. I mean, that's
Yeah,
an
I think it
interesting
just says
take.
undocumented.
Because if we, like I said, with need-based, it's hard to ask students for their personal information. I know I wouldn't want to give it to a bunch of students I
Right.
So if we make it merit-based and specific to undocumented students, we can do that, like separate from the other merit-based amount.
Oh, I thought that one of the issues, like, I don't know if you brought this up, Dean Williams, but I thought that we couldn't make it specific to one portion of the student body population, because it is like money derived from the student funds from everyone.
That is
I mean,
accurate.
we could
Yeah,
always
so we
include
wouldn't
an
do that.
option. Yeah.
We would have to make it a portion or a section of the
Right.
merit-based scholarships. Because like what you're saying, Harrison, why should we have these need-based scholarships when we already have this fund that never existed before at the same time, right? So in this case, hypothetically, we would have all the amount that's allocated for need-based to go to the care fund, and then a remaining amount for merit, and then we can make a certain amount in that merit, like a quota for undocumented students.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Wait,
I'm sorry,
Your
Dylan, can you repeat that
thoughts?
again?
yeah.
Okay, so we hypothetically we would not have a need-based scholarship because we would give all that money that we would allocate for that to the fund, and then in like the application for this remaining merit-based scholarship, we can have we can direct people to the emergency fund, but the rest of the scholarships themselves would be merit-based, but we could have a quota for undocumented students within that group.
Okay. Yeah, and Dean Williams, are we able to do that? I think that would be. I think that would be a good alternative if we're able to do that.
So what I'm hearing is that you all will have a general scholarship application that's open to all students. You're going to have some type of criterion, which would just can we all talk about briefly what merit means? Like how are you defining merit? Just so I'm clear on that.
So I don't think any of us saw that the rubric yet, but obviously it has nothing to do with financial situation. It's going to be a much smaller amount than what's given to the emergency fund, but I guess it's based on, I don't know, loosely like things like GPA, your classes,
Mm-hmm.
your extracurricular, what are you involved in, athletics, um, what are you involved in your community, things like that, I guess. I don't know. What else do you think?
Yeah, I think grades, student involvement, GPA, extracurriculars, all that stuff. Like aside from just like the need base.
So you can't limit. So just so I'm clear, you can't limit the application only to people with certain GPAs. It has to be open to all students. But if you all are saying we're going to judge the applications based on academic performance in collaboration with campus involvement, community service, etc., then that's up to the discretion of student government. But you have to make your rubric very transparent to all students.
Right. Yeah. So it wouldn't be like in the application, oh, if you don't have a 2.5, you can't apply. No, everyone could apply, but obviously the higher, it is, it'll help you more. But, if it's on the lower end and you're higher in extracurricular, community involvement and other things, then, you'd be, I guess, weighted more ideally.
So how are we reflecting the commitment to undocumented students? And is that something that earns points on the rubric, for example?
No, so that's going to be something that we'll have to do in the back end ourselves. First, we need to know how much money we're putting to this, and then how much money's going out per person, and then setting like a percentage of that specifically for undocumented students, who are like who come through like higher on the merit scale.
How will you all know that a student is undocumented or a DACA recipient?
What if no undocumented students, hypothetically, of course, but what if no undocumented students apply?
Well, I guess that'd be the same as if we had a scholarship for undocumented students and they didn't apply. I mean, that's not up to us.
Also, one alternative to that, to make sure that that doesn't happen, is we could also always forward it to the undocumented student services, and they
Oh, yeah.
can push it on their own listservs so that we can get a high probability chances of an undocumented student. What do you call it? Applying.
Yeah, I think if
Although-
we do that, it's very unlikely that we, wouldn't have any undocumented students apply.
I don't think it would necessarily have to be a question on the form, because like that itself can be, it can pose some issues if we pose a question like that of such vulnerable information that, if a student doesn't trust us to give, great, but if not, no. But that also, this would involve probably working with other departments to be getting that information and stuff.
So I think to be clear though, that information, so all of the information, the only information that you all will have is self-reported information. So you all can't know because of privacy what a student, so a student can list a certain GPA. We cannot share if that GPA is accurate or not, because that is a student's personal information. The same with any affiliations the student may have. So I think it's important to note that some of this is just taking, a student's word for, the truth, because otherwise there's no way to verify. I mean, there is a way, but you cannot receive that information. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. I did not know that, but that complicates things. I don't know how we can really do merit-based scholarships then, is people can just lie, or I don't know.
Yeah. But I feel like I feel like since this is gonna be, established as something that's very legit, as an applicant, whoever applies, and knowing that this is coming from Rutgers, whether it's the SGA or whatever, like the SGA has the highest authority in all, like compared to all the clubs, I feel like someone really wouldn't lie drastically or even at all, in my opinion, because um like I said, like they don't even
Yeah, I agree.
they don't even know that we don't have the authority to go and check and
Right.
stuff, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like, how do
So
they know we're not verifying it?
yeah, so I feel like taking someone's word won't be
Mm-hmm.
the biggest barrier, because this is coming from a legit source, like, the SGA, and with Rutgers also being involved, and also if we get undocumented services too, I don't think anyone would lie to the extent where they get the money and turn out they have an entire 6 point less GPA or whatever the case may be. My opinion.
What about perhaps okay, so instead of, I guess, asking for information from undocumented services, what if we ask for a recommendation on how we should approach this? Because let's say, we can all say that, like, oh, like, maybe we should put on our Google form that you can self-report it, but maybe someone from undocumented services can recommend us a way of how to approach that. What is our best approach to reach out to the undocumented students community? I think that would be the best way to approach this, because we're all just saying, we're saying stuff out of assumptions that, oh, someone might lie on the application, or that, hey, maybe perhaps they might not feel comfortable putting it on the application as well. Maybe we should put like a disclaimer or something. We're honestly not sure, and I think the best way to go about it is just working with someone from undocumented services to, recommend us the best way to approach it. And since we obviously can't access the students' privacy information and stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I'm just a little bit. I'm sorry if this has been said before, but I'm still not understanding how we're designating specifically like on how we're reflecting our commitment to undocumented students. Since we can't collect that information and it's all self-reported, or like when we say that we're doing it on the back end, right? Does that mean that like it'll be something on the rubric? Like how will we proceed to go about and like reflect that, oh, a portion of the scholarship is going to go to undocumented students?
So ideally, let's just say, right, we had that 20,000 that we were going to put towards scholarships in general. Let's say we were going to, these numbers are just made up, right? But let's say we were doing half for merit and half for need based. That half for need based, now, what's the point in doing a separate scholarship, right? That's going to go to the emergency fund. So then there's that half left for merit based. We need to decide how much would go to the people who are awarded, and then out of that we need to see like how many we're going to set a quota. So let's say, I don't know, 25% have to be undocumented students, and we're going to have to see how we go about attaining that information with undocumented student services. Those numbers are all in the air though, by the way, like it's up for discussion.
Right, of course. I'm just like, okay, so you're saying that like of like this amount of money or something, like a certain amount will be designated for only undocumented students can receive that?
Right.
Are we allowed to do that, Dean Williams?
I mean, technically, you all are supposed to be using qualifiers that apply to all students. So, for instance, any student can have a GPA. Any student can be involved in a leadership opportunity. It's up to that student to voluntarily decide whether or not they want to elect to be in certain categories, right? But when it comes to other qualifiers, so think of it this way. Would you be able to award students grant funding based on their status as a veteran or military affiliated student? Would you be able to do that for students who are LGBTQ? So I think it's a little bit, you're walking into a strange territory, because now you are, while I understand the intent is to kind of give consideration to students who are underrepresented and maybe in need of funds because they're not eligible for other types of funding. You don't also want to become discriminatory, because when it becomes a discriminatory category, then it does bring to question how student government is utilizing student fees for all students. So my advice is to actually, you may want to, give consideration, think critically about certain things, but I do not recommend making explicit certain affiliations that are not accessible to all students.
Yeah, I see that. I'm just trying to make sense of this and like how we can follow the resolution, because we can't set up a scholarship for undocumented students. Like that's explicit no. So, I mean, I don't see another option of being able to say on paper, like, okay, we have this, like we'll be able to do it for undocumented students. And this, because I don't know, if we do this, it's like both categories can win, if you're undocumented or not, and it's open to everyone to apply. So I guess that's why it's like a weird gray area. But I don't know how else we can make sure undocumented students can receive the scholarship.
Why can't we just like keep it open for everyone and then also inform, undocumented services that we're giving out scholarships for undocumented students, but like at the same time, like we wouldn't have to like put on the rubric or whatever. It's just if they get picked, they get picked. Like we just tell them to apply.
It would be
Does that make
open to
sense?
everyone. It would be open for everyone to begin with, and it wouldn't be on the rubric either, saying are you undocumented or not. But it's like, if we just open it to everyone, what's to say an undocumented person will win? Because we might just give it could go out to other people who come out higher on merit based. So how do we make
Right. So
sure
like,
that a certain amount win?
so like this way, it's not really like specifically for undocumented students. If that like resolves the issue that Dean Williams was talking about, because like let's say I don't know, like 10 undocumented students apply, how would we know how many to pick from those and how many need-based and how many merit-based? We'd have to have like a specific percentage for each category.
There would be no need based. That's all emergency fund.
Okay. So just academic and undocumented. But like at the same time, it would be hard to pick out the undocumented students because like Like, I don't know, based on what criteria would we pick them out or like choose the applications?
So I think Ricky made a great suggestion earlier, which is you all should do strategic outreach to your underrepresented group. So if you're saying that undocumented and DACA students are an underrepresented community, then you want to make sure that you're, again, partnering with the undocumented student services to send out specific outreach to that community. But at the bottom line is you cannot make a determination of whether somebody receives funding based on their undocumented status, because you couldn't do the reverse, right? You just can't discriminate against students for having one identity or another. So I think it really comes down to who is your applicant pool and how can you create a diverse pool that would allow you all to judge those applications objectively, but have enough people submitting applications so that in choosing there's diversity in who you're ultimately choosing. But the application process is it's supposed to be a process that allows you to judge objectively. It's actually not blind because you have people's names. Unless you wanted to. In the past, I just sent the application materials. In the past, I've helped the students with the applications by making them blind and redacting any identifying information so that it's objective, so that students aren't, having to be forced to try to judge applications for their peers who they may or may not know. So I'm happy to help if you all need that, or if you want to assign one person to redact student information and then judge them blindly. I think that could add a level of, objectivity to this process.
I agree, Dean Williams. I just have a question. This application is going to be different from the relief team that is sponsored by the care team, correct? It's not like this is going to be a different process than how the care team goes about it, or the same? I know they're different. I know they're different merit-based relief, right? Or no?
So the care team does not use any measure of. The only criteria that's used for the care team is the described self-reported need of a student and then financial need. Those are the only two criteria. If as long as the student's enrolled, submits the application, describes what they need, and then they have, and then financial aid verifies that need, then they are receiving awards.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
So Dean Williams, pretty much, you're saying like we need to keep it open to all, like to begin with, right? But not set an amount for any category and just kind of get more undocumented students to apply, and which increases the likelihood of them winning.
That would be the most objective way to go about it. And I would argue, for the sake of equity, I would not just send out information to the undocumented student community. You may want to consider other communities that are also underrepresented or do not have access to funds. So think about the fact that you have international students who are in the community who do not qualify for federal aid. You may also want to consider, students who are currently do not have a permanent address on file, because those students would be considered housing insecure or homeless. You may want to think about your veteran student population. So I feel like there's a lot of, and I understand why there's been intentionality around undocumented and DACA students, but I think you also need to think about all student populations and really be thoughtful in sending communication, targeted communication, but also very broad. Does that make sense? Because what you all don't want to be known for or be perceived as is weighing the scales in one community's favor versus another.
That makes a lot of sense. So, I mean, then really it's kind of pointless to ask their immigration status. Like, doesn't even matter if we ask then, as long because it's going to be open to all and anyone can win anyway. I just don't know how that will work with the resolution and the wording of it. I don't know. But what it seems like is that we wouldn't even ask that, or if they're LGBTQ or a member of a different community, we wouldn't even ask. Just be open to all, and then anyone with merit can win. But then how would we measure how how would we measure that, like in regards to the resolution?
I think it might be one of those things that we're probably not going to be able to do. Like Dean Williams said, I think our best shot at getting close to it is by targeting specific communities that are definitely in need, and that would increase our likelihood of getting, you know, getting what we're trying to achieve with the resolution. I guess like at the time that we were drafting the resolution, we didn't necessarily, you know, see this barrier of like, well, we did see this, we did know about the student fee limits and all that, but we didn't realize, I guess, what would you call it, like the obstacles, or like the strategy of how we would approach it. So from what it looks like, perhaps we're not going to get like a scholarship that literally says the undocumented scholarship. But if we do it in a way that is, you know, strategic, and like we target not only a documented to the document community, but other communities that are definitely in need, then I mean, way we accomplish things. It's just not going to be explicit, but we're still doing. I think and overall we would still be doing you know, a good job and a good deed to our communities.
I
It
agree.
won't be explicit.
So yeah, it
Which is
won't be
okay.
explicit. I want everyone to understand that now. I guess at this point, you know, it's not going to be explicit for any community, but the way that we're going to go about it, obviously, there won't be any barrier for members of these communities. It'll be, you know, open to everyone from the start. And we'll just have to try to do like more outreach to get like people to apply from those communities. So that's pretty much settled. There's really nothing else we can do in that. I mean, it all makes sense now. What about,
The only
um,
thing, my bad, Dylan, but I think the only thing we could kind of talk about, I don't know if we should talk about it as a committee from the scholarship, or if we should talk everyone as a whole, but I think we should definitely identify what other groups we should also target. We already got undocumented students as one, but as Dean Williams mentioned, there are other groups and identities on our campus that we should also, you know, identify and see who should we target.
oh
I don't
yeah,
know if
for
we should do
sure.
this as a whole, or we should do it, you know,
Maybe
in
we
our
should do that as a
committee.
committee, just because we need to like get the application itself like ready, and then once it is ready, then we can start figuring out like where we're targeting. What do you think?
Well, I think that's cool. I don't know what does, because I mean, if we have the only thing is like if we have the application ready, we should also, you know, have in mind at least some CCs as to who we should also forward the message to, send to their listservs.
Can I make a suggestion? So maybe one thing that you all want to do is utilize two resources. Number one is that there are lots of departments. So I'm thinking you can send it to OISS, you can send it to undocumented students, you can send it to intercultural, LGBTQ student services, the Office of Disability Services. You know, just kind of get some of those areas within the university. You could just send it directly to the staff member and say, hey, can you forward this on to your specific listserv? But another idea is that you all can also connect with student organizations to say, hey, we have this scholarship. If you have, you know, members within your specific groups that might be interested, please forward on to them as well. And then, of course, send out the campus-wide announcement for all students. So that's a strategy you might want to use in the essence of time just to get it done.
So I think in terms of marketing, it's not really going to be a problem. We have a lot of outlets and people on campus kind of spread the word in a formal way. But I think I want to take it back and kind of for us to consider how much money we actually have and how many people would win. So let's go back to the hypothetical realm where we had 20,000 for this, and half of it, the 10,000, would go to the emergency fund because it was need based. Now that means we're left with 10,000 hypothetically for merit based scholarships. How many people would win? 10? 20? So we kind of need to judge, like, now we need to consider how many people are going to apply and the amount that we are going to award. Is it going to be $1,000 each, 500 each, more? And we need, just to remember how many people can actually win.
I think if we're only going to have 10,000, 1,000 per student would be a lot, considering we want to reach as many students as possible. Maybe between like, I don't know, 200 and 500.
But that
Or
10,000
if we
number
should
is
just like,
just hypothetical right now anyway. So I don't know, like with
yeah.
this, we're going to hear back. But I feel like if we give less than 500 too, that's like nothing. It's kind of like, I don't know, like an insult in a way. I don't know. It just seems like it's not that helpful in terms of paying for classes or anything.
Or how about just like 500 per student? Just so like we can give out more help to more students. I feel like it would be like a reasonable amount. I feel like 1,000 is too much considering we don't have a lot of funds.
Well, I guess what does everyone else think? Do we want to wait until we know the exact number and then it'll be up to the committee, or you want to talk about numbers now?
I think we should wait until like we have the actual numbers, and then the committee should discuss that, as well as like who they're sending out to and the rubric or evaluation criteria.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and once we get the numbers, I'm sure the committee will be transparent enough to update us and, also maybe get our input as to how much should be allocated to each student as well. Once the money is actually decided upon.
Yeah, that number should definitely be posted as soon as we get it.
All right. Is there anything else that you want to discuss? I mean, a lot of this is just going to be in the back end, and I'm going to be talking to Sabrina about everything we've discussed, and she's going to try to get the group together and draft the email, and then talk to you about the form.
Wait, I'm sorry. Who's going to be on the committee?
Well, as of now, it's everyone who said they were interested before. I mean, more people can if they want.
Where is that listed? Just to, I guess just to get a clear look at who's in it.
Let me try to find it. It might be in the meeting minutes prior.
Speaking of meeting minutes, can those be posted? Because we haven't had any minutes posted on Raider Link since late February.
Yeah. So Najira hasn't been able to attend, so I've been taking minutes. So I need to like talk to her about doing that.
Cool.
I think for the committee, Sabrina sent a message to the Slack if you were interested to like the message. If you want to be on
Yeah,
the committee.
I know that a couple of other committees have like working committee channels on the Slack. Is there one formed for this as well, or no?
As
Not
of
yet.
now, I don't think so. I mean, I can tell
Yeah.
Sabrina to like make one.
Oh yeah, I see it. It's on the SGA 2019 channel. It was posted last week at 11:44. It was Sabrina. She messaged, if interested in scholarship working group, like this message. And so far, only 3 people liked it. Carolyn, Dylan, and myself.
All right, so I'll take down names right now and put it in these minutes. Who is interested?
I'm interested. If possible, like I would like to talk about the. Okay. I'd like to talk about the rubric and evaluation criteria, but I'll excuse myself from the actual process, and I'm willing to redact the information if you guys are interested in doing so.
Okay, so I'll just make a note by your name. Is anyone else interested? So right now it is Sabrina, Dylan, Ricky, Harrison.
I think it's safe to say you could put Sarah's name on it. She did mention that she was interested in working on that earlier. She's not here at the moment, though.
All right, I'll just have to reach out and ask her. Anyone else or no? Okay. All right. Well, that settles that. I'm gonna update Sabrina after this meeting, and she'll get started on it. Are there any other updates anyone wants to talk about?
Yeah. So, and thank you, Dean Williams, by the way, for submitting the comments on two of the newer committees, for the transitioning committee and the constitutional amendments committee. We're looking at those right now, and like hopefully we can have those meetings, and for our final meeting next week, we can hopefully discuss and pass those as formal amendments to our as formal changes to our bylaws. So just to give some context, like those two committees, I'm not the head of either, but I just saw the email just now, so I want to bring it up. The transitioning committee basically formalizes the committee that we currently have, that will transition incoming senators and also hopefully debrief all outgoing members of SGA. Please submit the legacy questions. We only have 14. So if you have not done so already, please submit that. I'll be posting another reminder in the Slack. And Dylan, I'll send you like a list of names that we still need. So hopefully you can send that out from the Run SGA email.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Okay,
Send
fantastic.
me that list. But anything you want to vote on next Monday, just because it's the last meeting, please try to have it to me by Friday so I can just send it
Yeah,
out to everyone earlier than usual.
definitely.
Okay.
And I don't know if like Akwe or Ricky, you guys want to talk a bit more about either committee?
Um, I guess that like I mean the language I think the language is pretty much settled. We just like Harrison mentioned that we just got the email from Dean Williams. Um, okay. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I guess on my end for that one specifically. I don't know if Quay, do you have anything that you want to add? Okay, so and now in terms of the constitutional committee, so like we're basically, as Harrison mentioned, we've been basically giving it an overlook on all the bylaws and recommendations that we have, and changing, like making some changes, like where we see necessary to be done, and where it's valid, I guess, like without necessarily prompting a uh, a referendum. So that's what we've been up to. I think we might have to. What do you call it? I don't know, Harrison. Do you want to share what we have so far, or should we hold it off for a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I can give a brief summary. So, like, as a committee, we've been reading through the most recent constitution that we have. It hasn't been updated for some years now, and there are a lot of things that needed updating, unfortunately. But some of the bigger issues were like number one, we felt as though the Speaker of the Senate should be elected by the senators themselves, not chosen by the president. There were a number of positions that are out of date due to structural changes within Rutgers University. And I see. I think that's the most of it. There's just some other minor changes here and there. Is there anything else that you can remember, Ricky?
I'm trying. Oh, actually, yeah. There's one other important one that we were also discussing. This is something that I think I brought up earlier in the year, but like nothing necessarily flourished from that. But it's another thing that we've been talking. Nothing again. None of this is all certain, but this is in regards to like University Senate and like like what plan do we have for it to be something that like can be a position that's always filled, just like the Senate seats that we have in SGA. For the most part, we've been able to keep those seats filled, but one of the most difficult parts one of the most difficult seats to fill has been University Senate for quite some time, and so receiving recommendations from like other student governments in the Rutgers system, like Camden and Rusa in New Brunswick. One thing that they do that's very unique that we don't do is that for their university senators, so those that go to New Brunswick once every Friday, for like 9 Fridays I think in a year, those senators also sit on their student governments and have a vote. So it's something that we've been looking into and possibly offering as a possibility of doing it here. Again, like nothing's final. We're just trying to see like if there's any other alternatives or incentives as a way that we can have people always have those seats filled in the University Senate, because that's really, it's something really important, that Rutgers Newark representation is always needed. So yeah, so we definitely like to hear other suggestions if there are any. But like I think the way it's worked in Rusa and Camden, from what we've heard, the seats are always filled and people run for those elections. And I guess another argument that someone else has brought up is the fact that perhaps our Senate might be too small. And it's, giving rough numbers that we have of undergrad students to student senators, give or take, it's like about 700 students per representative. Sounds like a small number, but um, in reality though, like I think given our small size compared to other bigger campuses, it's actually a higher ratio than usual. So by looking at the rough numbers, if we were to add University Senate to our SGA, that would give us 6 new senators, increasing our size from 22 to 26. I mean, excuse me, to 28, and that would lower the ratio of representatives. Then yeah, like that. I mean, it would be there would be like I guess a huge upside into increasing our size of the Senate. And also it would split the workload of the academic senator, because we can have the 2 senators that we have already, that's even equally distributed to each school, as their duties can be redefined as handling internal affairs in Rutgers Newark, whereas the other university senate reps, their duties is specifically also working within the school, but as well as representing us at Rutgers wide. So like instead of, I guess, increasing the responsibilities, which is already hard enough for an academic senator to try to, if we were to try to include in their responsibilities as being meeting with your deans, meeting with your constituents, and going to the University Senate every Friday. That was one alternative that we were also looking at, but we thought that could be too much of a workload for one senator to do. So
let me just jump in with some updates and some thoughts. So going into the next academic year, every university senate position is filled. And I think if we give them a seat on SGA, it would be counterproductive, because it would take us back to the concept of having academic senators required to do both, which is just plainly unrealistic. Like it just, in the past we wanted academic senators to commit to university senate, and it's not realistic. So I don't think we can do that and give them seats, because it's like then we're telling them to do both, and I think it'll be much harder to find people to commit to that. I think it comes down to a matter of more outreach and trying to come up with different strategies to fill these positions. And And I think too, like with RUSA, they have far too many people in their student assembly, and it makes things a lot, I don't know, like logistically more difficult and kind of like a nightmare in terms of getting things done.
I don't know if there's been some confusion, but I think what Ricky was describing, correct me if I'm wrong, Ricky, but basically, like, we're delineating university senators as a separate position from academic senators. So, academic senators for each school would focus strictly on internal affairs, whereas university senators, like, while they while they would be a member of our current Senate and they would have voting powers, their responsibilities would mostly be representing their academic schools to the university Senate, just offering that voting power and that place as an incentive to join the position for university Senate.
Oh, I know. I understood.
Exactly. So that's
I
exactly
understood what you
correct,
were saying.
Harrison. So like I guess because so we've sat, I guess using us as an anecdotal example, we sit in committees in university senate, and usually when you're in charge of writing a charge, you usually have to sit in meetings with different departments and all that stuff. So I guess if we include, I mean technically, um, the university senate is still a position that's run on elections. It's on our packets and stuff like that. So it's not a duty that is supposed to be held by an academic senator. That's an alternative that a suggestion that we had earlier in the year that we wanted to offer, but that poses an issue because it adds a lot more work for that student to do, and it might inhibit some efficiency in that position. So by also I think there was a referendum a few years ago. I might be wrong, so I might be completely wrong, but positions for university senate used to be appointed by deans of schools, and there was no process of student government whatsoever. Since then, that has been changed. Now, students have to get to elect, their university senate representatives. The only issue is because there was no, like I guess, transparency or no criteria of like, oh, like if you go to university senate, you're going to be guaranteed, a ride or some type of like lunch voucher or something like that. Like that's nothing. That's nothing that hasn't been guaranteed or at the very minimum like advertised or like known. So like no student, or the fact that students don't even know like what university senate is. So I think that it's kind of hard to kind of try to justify that. What do you call it? To try to justify that like they can go to university senate, but like their involvement just ends there, like one Friday a month. Their involvement can be a lot more, and on top of that, in like the the what do you call it? The pupil per student rep would decrease, especially in a school that receives a lot of enrollment like SAS-N, where their school is a lot bigger, but yet they still have only two representatives. Whereas a school, not to call you out Anna or like on purpose, but like SPA, a smaller school, still has two representatives. So they have an easier way of like I guess having like that pupil to student rep ratio is a lot smaller than from SAS-N. So I think by adding representatives into the Senate based on proportions that has already been determined by like bylaws of university Senate, I think it gives us a better a better opportunity to better represent students throughout the throughout.
Let me just jump in. I want to, because you're kind of going off on other like things, and I want to go back to the foundation. Right? You were saying I understood what you were saying first, but it's just kind of like a twisty subject. So I just think it's unrealistic because like right, we wanted academic senators to do it possibly as an alternative, but it was unrealistic for them to do those meetings and SGA meetings. But now, if we want people to be on university senate and then come to our meetings, it's the same exact thing, just the roles are flipped. I think that's unrealistic. Going into next year, every position for university senate's already filled, and I think really it's just a matter of outreach and just really telling people what it is because people don't understand what it is. That's the problem.
I mean, we get that it's filled, but what we're looking at is onwards, past next year. Are we really going to have students that are going to be there running for university senate spots? Because we haven't seen that this year. We haven't seen that in previous years. What makes
I
it
think
so
the
different
only
that we're going to get anything
problem with
years?
having an sorry, Ricky. I think the only problem with having university senators on the Senate is getting them to commit to coming to the meetings, because a problem with getting university college senators is that we weren't able to get them to come to the meetings. So I feel like with the university senate, they just have that idea in mind that they're just going to go to that one Friday meeting. I think once per month. So it would be hard to get them to commit to the Monday meetings. And for next year, like Dylan said, we already have all our university senators. So it would be hard, I guess, to tell them, like now you have to come to the Monday meeting that we have for the remainder of the year. But I guess like for upcoming years, that could be a possibility to bring up.
The thing that's like biggest for us to keep in mind with all of this is that while for the upcoming year we have all these positions filled, historically that's not been the case. And when it comes to participation for University Senate, that's also not been the case historically. So I think something that is really important for us to acknowledge here is that by sharing that workload a little bit, maybe we haven't been able to get them to show up to all the meetings in the past and to put in all the work for doing both. But by splitting that workload, basically you're just telling these students that that is their sole responsibility. They need to come to these meetings. They need to stay up to date. But that's not something that they have to worry about. That's not their main responsibility. And so by giving them that express responsibility, that could help in being able to get participation after that, because it's a very important thing that historically we've just been lacking.
So historically,
thank you for bringing that up, Will. I think that's like really that's a good point. Like we're not changing anything for next year. It's just considering how we can change the structures to promote this engagement with students and make sure students are represented, right? Because even though like we have like a lot of people running for SGA positions, it's very difficult to find people for University Senate, even though those positions are, I would argue, like as important in representing our university, right? And then another point that I want to make was that, like, although yeah, it's difficult to show up to the meetings like 11:30, 12:50. We all have very busy schedules. We're all students. Some of us work as well. Um, the meetings are not the main responsibilities of SGA senators. As an SGA senator, like the majority of the workload is actually beyond your meetings, right? It's like meeting with your constituents. It's having those academic town halls, right? It's meeting with your academic deans. It's meeting with different departments. And that, I feel, is the bigger workload, at least for a senator, at least from my experience. So I don't think that it's asking too much to potentially in the future offer them the ability to vote in return for sitting in and on our meetings. And this would also increase the engagement between university senators as well as academic senators.
So I completely understand what you're saying, but it's not making sense to me just because, like, so historically, right, like as Will pointed out, University Senate has been in the toilet. But I think that's because historically we've never prioritized University Senate. It's just been forgotten about. I think we need to go about it in other ways where we actually put in paper that there needs to be this commitment to University Senate. And I understand that you're like, the logic here is that you're trying to incentivize more people to do the job by giving them more things. But I think realistically, you're making the job harder, and I think that'll make it more unlikely for people to go for it, because it's already hard to find people to commit for this. Like personally, as I was reaching out to dozens of people to fill these spots for the upcoming year, it was already a problem. And I can tell you that all the ones that agreed to sign up definitely would not be able to do the Monday meetings. So I think when we're trying to fill these positions that are already hard enough to fill, I think making it harder is going to make our lives harder in actually trying to get things done in University Senate. So like it makes sense that we're trying to incentivize it. I think we need to go about it a different way and put in stone, like paper and stone, that that there is this commitment towards University Senate, because like Will said, historically it has been in the toilet, but that's because it's never been prioritized before. So we need to kind of set it in stone, like how we should prioritize this. I think,
No, definitely.
going around this circle is just making it harder to begin with to fill it.
Definitely. I mean, that was part of the intention behind this. By including this in a bylaw and giving them those positions, we are formalizing it, we are prioritizing it, and we're showing that this is important to us. And that this is just the idea that the Constitutional Committee came up with after discussion amongst ourselves. But of course, like we can definitely bring it up. Like it'll most likely be included in the list of bylaw changes that we'll send out by this Friday. But if not, of course, like moving into next year, it's something to consider among the other revisions to our SGA structure.
I'm just very concerned now because, Monday's the last meeting of the semester, and what was originally supposed to be a committee that was going to add in amendments that should have been added that passed, now it seems like there's going to be a lot of overhaul and changes that are thrown in last minute in the last meeting. I think that's just, very concerning. So I want to make sure we're kind of not doing that.
Dean Williams mentioned transportation for University Senate. I think it's very important for us to maybe have that like set in stone, because I know last semester it was a bit of a challenge, getting students. I mean, for the majority of times there was transportation provided, and maybe we can include that like in an amendment or something for next
So, to
year.
my understanding from reading through the Constitution and the bylaws, although we could include that in the bylaws for University Senate, and yeah, like the main point of the Constitutional Committee is, of course, updating it so that it's a working document, along with the amendments and bylaws from before, and updating anything that's out of place. For the transportation in particular, that actually would be. Correct me if I'm wrong on this, Dean Williams. I think Kenneth might have stepped off the call. But that would be through the budget that's supposed to be approved every year by the Senate. And that's actually like that would have to be included in the budget like earlier on. Because the Senate is supposed to vote on every single item that the SGA account is spending money on.
That is correct. I think, though, similar to the funding that you all note within your constitution to state that you're going to provide a certain percentage to the executive board and a certain percentage to the student organizations, my question was really raised about what commitment is the student government willing to give to the University Senate in terms of ongoing support for transportation, as this has been a barrier for students in the past. So if the SGA is willing to say, moving forward, it's a part of our bylaws that if we are going to assign these senators to attend these meetings, that we're also going to provide institutionalized support and ongoing support for these students. I think that should be a commitment that's written into the bylaws. Otherwise, what happens is that it's decided on a case by case, year by year basis, and that could actually create a barrier if, for instance, the SGA fails to take this into consideration in the future. So that's where I was raising this question of, is there something that you all can guarantee will, at least allow these students to have access and remove that barrier?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's something that's overlooked in part of giving if we pass this, in giving them voting power. It wouldn't just be voting power, it would also be, it would be a position in SGA, like in the internal run SGA position. So that also includes them having funding, as every Senate peer would have. So this would remove that barrier of depending on the SGA year by year, case by case. Oh, let's hope they give us a lunch voucher this semester or this year, or let's hope they're going to give us transportation. With them having a position in SGA, it would be secured, and I think that's something that's being overlooked.
But this is kind of circular though, because I think we're making it harder on ourselves to fill these positions because we're making the duties harder.
Can you
We're saying
specify
give them funding, do all this. They would want this stuff, but the executive board could just say, okay, we, for the first time ever, are designating this amount of money for University Senate. I think
Right,
we're
but
overcomplicating it.
but you have to look past that. Like look past that year. Like how can we secure that University Senate is going to be a position that's always filled from here on forth? Because what you're saying is that that the commitment will be there for, at least for next year. But what about the year after?
That's not what I'm
Or the
saying
prior?
either, though. I am talking about the future as well. I'm just saying, though, you're making the future harder if we're going to make the job harder. We're adding duties, making the position harder to fill. I'm telling you, like, I fill these positions, none of these people would be able to do all this with their schedules. I think it's making it more
have you
unrealistic.
specified? Can you specify how exactly is it being hard? How's it harder?
They would have to attend not only the meetings at University Senate, but then come to our meetings as well, and then do the duties of a senator.
No, we're
Has it not been
describing,
done?
at least to my understanding, like we're not requiring them to take on additional responsibilities of the academic senators. It would just merely they have the powers of a senator and they're part of the Senate. I think like at least part of the effort behind like updating the bylaws and all these structures is to ensure that we do have that legacy and we do have that continuation of our work. Because even though the executive board next year may say, okay, we're going to give this amount to show our support for university senators, that's no guarantee the executive board the following year will do the same. I think that's the point that Dean Williams was trying to bring up and why we should at least include like transportation or food vouchers for university senators in the bylaws.
Oh, I totally get that. Yeah, I think there's a bunch of different ways we can go about that. Like I said, we want to set it in stone somehow, but I think going in this circular way of trying to add more to the position is going to make it harder. It's not actually, I think it's like this incentive makes sense in terms of like, okay, we want to get more people to do the job. What can we give them? But in reality, the pool for the amount of people who are going to do this is even less than it is now. So I think there are other ways we can set in stone different bylaws, like with food vouchers or financial commitments, different things. I think historically we've just never prioritized University Senate. So I think there are like countless other ways we could go about it rather than making rather than expanding the position and decreasing the pool from however small it is already.
I don't know. I feel like
What I'm saying is that there's already not many people who are willing to do this. And maybe even the number is actually greater than we think, just because since we've never prioritized this, we've never done strategic outreach to actually fill these positions like early on, get people to run for it. Because the problem was nobody understood what University Senate was. I mean, this could come down even to the elections packet because you see on it SGA Senate, University Senate, tons of words, and you're like, well, wait, what's the difference? And people just don't understand what it is, and they don't run for it. So I think there are different ways to go about it rather than like making the position harder. That's just what I'm seeing.
so like I completely see like what you're talking about. I guess the disconnect for me is that I don't see necessarily how it's making it harder because we aren't giving them, senatorial responsibilities. Because even currently, anybody who's in the SGA who's also in Senate or the University Senate is also required to come to those meetings. But regardless of that, my question for you would then be, since it's strategic outreach, possibly that could be solving the goals. What would you recommend that we could put in the bylaws for strategic outreach so it's concrete, so in the future we can make sure that this is something that's happening?
So personally, I don't think this is something along with, I don't know, I'm hearing there's a lot of different bylaw changes that want to happen next week. I think, we already know that the next year's SGA is going to prioritize these things, and then we can go about it. I'm just concerned, not only because we're talking a lot about just one subject right now. I think we can have like discussions on the specifics like later on. I'm just concerned that what was supposed to be a committee adding the 1 or 2 amendments passed in 5 years has become many changes to the Constitution that are thrown in the last meeting. I'm just concerned about that.
Well, we have to weigh, at sort of a balance, because the last time that the Constitution was worked on at all was in 2015. And I know that for this upcoming year, this is something we're planning on, prioritizing. But in the longer run, it's not necessarily that. And so that's why it's important that we put something in concrete that lasts further than this year. Now, in terms of what we're supposed to be doing for say, it isn't like our mission statement was never necessarily just to implement the 2 amendments that have been added. It's been for us to be able to go back and revise the things that need to be changed and fix it, because so many things have changed since 2015. A really great example of that is being the different titles that have changed since then, going from the vice president, Paul Robeson, to the dean of students, things like that. So there's a lot of things that over the course of time has just become necessary and proper for us to for need to change.
Oh yeah, the Constitution though has been well, this is quotations, worked on since, in between those 5 years, things have been passed. We've just never added it. So that's been kind of like the goal, I don't know, at least, at the beginning of this. Yeah, things need to be changed like that. Dean of Students, NCAS, that needs to be SASN every single spot it's mentioned. That's things we've discussed. But I'm just concerned. I just think it's concerning, reasonably, that in the very last meeting of the semester, we're talking about many substantive changes, not just like wording here, but like substantive changes. And yeah, I mean, and maybe it's to safeguard things in the future, but I think it's extremely hasty. And we've never voted on so many things in such a little amount of time. That's all I'm bringing up. Like, and again, I don't know exactly what everything is, but it seems like it's becoming a long list. And I think, to have all that sent out before the next meeting, fairly and looked over, and just to be voted on hastily that meeting, I just think it's reasonably concerning and potentially unnecessary.
So just for the record, there's nothing prohibiting you all from, continuing to work on the Constitution and then tabling further, votes in terms of the actual amendment and ratification until the fall semester. I mean, that does put you all into a precarious situation in terms of the semester, but I think that doesn't negate the work that has already been done by the committee. And keeping in mind that you don't have to be a member of the student government or an officer to work on this committee. So essentially, the same students, if they're willing to, can continue this work ongoing in the future, just so it doesn't feel, to Dylan's point, so hasty. But I think it's ultimately up to you all how you want to vote moving forward.
So we've clearly expended the time for the meeting, but whatever you do want to vote on, please send to me earlier if possible, so I can send it out to everyone so they can look at it, before the meeting.
Yeah, definitely. We'll send a list of everything, like all the language, to be voted on, and hopefully after the remarks of the vice chancellor, we can vote on that, and then enjoy our last meeting of SGA.
All right.
Williams, I do have one more
Yep.
thing. Let's see, I got a DM on the SGA Instagram. It's a student that they said that they had contacted the care team and that they sent the application last week and they haven't had an answer back. So I was just wondering, like, has there been? I mean, I'm seeing now. I mean, now we know that the funds have been depleted, but have there been like any sort of like, you know, like what's the usual response time, I guess, like of like when someone submits an application? Like how long does it take before someone from the team contacts them?
So it is a two-pronged process. So the care team responds immediately. Once the application is submitted, it is kind of in this queue that's being held between care team and Office of Financial Aid. There have been a number of students who have reached out and asked about the status of their application. It could depend on the specific case. So some of the students don't have their direct deposit set up. Other students have received an award, but they're not aware that they have received the award. Some students did not open up the correspondence to give them the award information, and then some students' applications are still under review. So it really depends on the student, but what I would advise is that the student's name be shared with the care team. There might be a student we already responded to because we are actively responding and communicating with those students.
All right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because they were just asking that they had already submitted an application and sent out the letter that they said that the coordinator told them to send over a week ago, and that they just haven't heard anything back. That's okay. I'll see how should we I guess respond, or should we respond at all?
Yeah, I would respond just so they don't feel like no one is listening to them, and just let them know. Maybe what you can do, if you don't mind, you can get the student's email, and then you can send an email to the care team, copy the student, and then we can respond all so everyone's in the same loop.
Got it. Okay, that's cool.
Okay.
That's cool. We
All
can
right,
do
I'm
that.
so sorry. I have to run, but to Harrison's question about refunds, there are differences between student refunds depending on this individual student's account. So people will not necessarily receive the same refund. And I would not advise them to kind of compare their refunds to their friends, because you don't know what that person had on their account previous to getting the refund.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you all so much. I'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Dean Williams.
Take care. Motion to adjourn.
Second that.
Second.
All right. Thank you, everyone. See ya.
Bye.
Take care.